Stuart Ramsay has been covering the fighting for SKY News. He is in the Georgian capital of Tbilisi. Stuart, I understand that a ceasefire has been negotiated, but according to Georgian officials, the attacks are continuing. What are you hearing about continued attacks by the Russians into Georgia?
Well, as soon as this ceasefire was announced by the Russians, I have to say that the people in Tbilisi particularly were out on the streets straight away, and then reports started coming through from the Georgian officials saying that the ceasefire was broken straight away, that two villages had been attacked near the border with South Ossetia. That's the breakaway region that's been the focus of so much of the fighting over the past few days. They said that helicopter gunships had attacked villages, that there was no military there, and that the Russians would have known that. I have to say, though, that the Russians immediately came back and said it wasn't true, that they had expected these type of claims, that they had no intention of carrying on fighting, they had won this, and that it was propaganda. There were also reports came through of an armoured column moving towards Abkhazia. That's the second breakaway area through Georgia proper. That was a Russian military convoy. That came from a wire report, and I think we can pretty much confirm that that is going to be correct. Now, the Russians would say that that wouldn't be breaking the ceasefire. It just means that they're moving around. They've said they're going to stay in the region. They have no intention of leaving for the time being. So it is very confused. It's difficult to know whether the fighting is going on. I suspect it is not. But if there has been broken at the beginning, it would be because some of the information perhaps hadn't got through to individual commanders on the ground. And in wars that I've covered, that often happens at the beginning of ceasefires. There's often violations in the initial few days, and the hope is that people stick with it and that it calms down. But it doesn't help, of course, for the people here. It adds to the tension.
I was going to ask you, is the fear that the ceasefire will not hold, or once things calm down, are people confident, or do they have any degree of belief that it will hold?
Well, what's I think really important here is that President Sarkozy of France has come after meetings in Russia, and he's going to meet President Saakashvili, and he's with him now, and he's going to be talking about a 6-point peace plan. That is really crucial to this, because if we can get signatures on the paperwork, then perhaps it will hold. I think the key to this, Katie, is perhaps people don't realise nothing has actually been signed yet. This is a ceasefire pretty much called by the Russians on their own. They didn't need to do it. They've won this, but they decided to call it a ceasefire. The Georgian army had withdrawn from the immediate battle zone and are here around Tbilisi. So we need to get the signatures on the paperwork. The problem is, particularly as for the way Russia would see it, is that you've had the United States, the European Union and NATO coming out massively supporting Georgia. They would see that as provocative before they've even got to signing. So you could even easily have a breakdown, and certainly I think, although people are very pleased at what's happened here, they are concerned that it could start again. And we know that the Russians are fully prepared and in position to start attacking if, for example, the Georgians decided to carry out some type of offensive operation themselves. And that could include, of course, just moving around in the countryside and areas back towards South Ossetia. That would probably immediately be considered by the Russians an opportunity, perhaps, or a reason for them to attack, and then it could all break down very quickly.
What are the Russians looking for at this point in time?
There's two ways of looking at this. Georgia would like this to be seen by the rest of the world as a country that is westward looking, wants to join NATO, it wants to be like a country like Ukraine, and that Russia doesn't want it to be so. Russia would say that the problems have been caused by the West acknowledging the existence of Kosovo. As soon as that happened, they said that you would have South Ossetia and Abkhazia in Georgia would want to have independence. Now, they've been effectively independent since the mid-90s, but of course the West hasn't acknowledged that, and Georgia has remained as a united country. Russia didn't want Kosovo to be made independent, and they warned that this would happen. So this, they say, is a consequence. On the main view that they take is that they want the people in Abkhazia and South Ossetia who have strong links to Russia to be able to remain Russian citizens. In South Ossetia, for example, they still use the ruble and they've got Russian passports. They want to have their sphere of influence in that region, and they don't want it to go. And that is the crucial difference between the two. Georgia sees this as part of its expansion and it's wanting to be part of the West, and Russia says it's not. It's just about having ethnic elements within Georgia remaining being able to have links with Russia. So it is very complicated, and that's why you have this sort of problems that we've seen over these last few days. Because I don't think many people expected it to turn into the a full-out war that we had here, and Georgia is responsible for that. They did, without doubt, start this, but it's the Russians who have, without doubt, finished it.
Have the hopes of the Georgians to become an independent country, have they been dashed, or are they still hopeful that might in fact happen?
Katie, I think you were asking whether the two breakaways will still try to remain as independent countries, and yes, they will. This is part of their involvement in this, if you like. The Russians were brought in straight away. They knew they had a huge amount of support from the Russian forces, that's Abkhazia and South Ossetia, and certainly they do want to get this independent status. They want to be separate countries. However, I think most of the Western world and Russia don't believe that Georgia should be broken up. So they may not be happy with any of the sides, but they will continue in their quest to be given statehood themselves.
I understand that you spent some time on the front lines in the town of Gori, which is close to the contested area of South Ossetia. Can you just describe for our viewers what you witnessed there?
Yes, I spent a few days in and out. It was without doubt a very, very dangerous place to be. The positions that were normally attacked, and it did change, and there were attacks into the city itself, but the positions that were initially attacked had been where artillery had been firing at the Russians. Unfortunately, and it goes back to the Soviet era, that although you have a military installation, it is often in a built-up civilian area, and certainly we saw flats, blocks of flats that had been pretty much destroyed by incoming shells. At least 5 people were killed in Gori today. But we also went past the city, which had become not deserted, but almost everyone had left, probably about 80% had left, and you went into the countryside, and that's where the Georgian army had dug themselves in, again often near villages off main roads, and that was very, very dangerous indeed. The Russians didn't attack on the ground. They had total air superiority, and they were bombing the Georgian positions in a systematic way, moving towards Gori effectively, and it was certainly their plan was to bomb the Georgians from those positions and get them to leave Gori and head back to Tbilisi, which is what they did. But colleagues had been targeted in their cars, colleagues from other news organisations, and certainly on a number of occasions we had to take cover beneath trees as jets roared overhead and bomb these Georgian positions. They were well dug in, but it was amazing how quick, as that systematic air bombardment got underway, they withdrew. The order came through just to get back towards Tbilisi, caused chaos, but they did do it, and they left everything behind, and that's the real concern down there. There is nobody protecting the civilians who have stayed. There are reports of irregular fighters, that's militia groups, who are from South Ossetia, wandering through villages, perhaps looking for retribution for what happened in South Ossetia. It's extremely, extremely dangerous there. I say there is no normal law and order anymore. If the irregulars come through, there's no police and no Georgian military to stop them, and the civilians that are there must feel extremely exposed.